What happens when someone mistakes judicial kindness for weakness? Inside a packed Providence courtroom filled with cameras and spectators, Judge Frank Caprio was moments away from delivering one of the most unforgettable responses of his career. The woman standing before him had no idea she was about to go viral. "For all the wrong reasons, you think you can lecture me?" she shouted. "I don't care if you're a judge or the Pope himself." Her voice echoed through the stunned courtroom. What she didn't realize was that this wasn't just any judge. This was Frank Caprio, and he was about to remind her that respect is not optional in his courtroom. The next minute would change everything. Her arrogance would collapse, the room would erupt, and millions would watch justice unfold in a way no one expected. The tension was electric. Camera crews leaned in. Court officers stiffened. Even the bailiff had never seen anyone challenge Judge Caprio like this. Yet Caprio simply smiled, and in that moment, she realized she had made the worst mistake of her life. The morning of September 15th began like any other at the Providence Municipal Court. Judge Caprio arrived at 7:30, coffee in hand, reviewing the day's docket. 23 cases. Traffic violations. Parking disputes. Minor infractions. Nothing out of the ordinary for the man America had come to know as its most beloved courtroom judge. At 72, Caprio had seen everything. Decades on the bench. Thousands of cases. Every type of defendant imaginable, from overwhelmed parents to defiant teenagers, from struggling immigrants to wealthy professionals trying to talk their way out of tickets. His reputation was built on compassion, humor, and an uncanny ability to see past excuses to the truth beneath them, but no one in that courtroom was ready for what walked through the doors next. Case 17. Sandra Mitchell, 45 years old, charged with aggressive driving and failure to appear. The clerk called her name 3 times before she finally strutted in as if she owned the place. Designer handbag swinging. Heels striking the marble floor. Cell phone pressed firmly to her ear. "Yeah, I'm in some courthouse right now," she said loudly, ignoring the bailiff's gestures to end the call. "Don't worry about it. These people don't scare me." Judge Caprio watched quietly from the bench, his expression calm but alert, his eyes tracking every move. The courtroom fell silent. Even the camera operator sensed something was about to happen. "Ms. Mitchell," Judge Caprio said gently, his voice steady with decades of authority, "please end your phone call and approach the bench." She raised one finger at the judge. "Hold on," she snapped into the phone, then looked up at Caprio with open contempt. "Can't you see I'm on an important call?" The courtroom gasped. In 40 years, no one had ever shown Judge Caprio such blatant disrespect. Court officers shifted. The bailiff's hand drifted toward his radio. But Caprio remained calm, almost serene. What came next would be replayed millions of times around the world. "Ma'am," Judge Caprio said, still composed, but now with a sharp edge that commanded the room, "in this courtroom, I am not these people. I am Judge Caprio. And you will show respect, or you will learn why that is not optional." Sandra Mitchell laughed. Actually laughed. "Respect?" she scoffed as she finally ended the call. "You want respect? Maybe you should earn it instead of hiding behind that little robe." The silence was overwhelming. Cameras zoomed in. Court reporters froze. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to fade. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and controlled, but heavy with absolute authority. "Ms. Mitchell, I've practiced law longer than you've been alive. I've shown compassion in this courtroom to thousands of people. I've reduced fines, dismissed charges, and given second chances to those who showed genuine remorse. But respect is not negotiable." She rolled her eyes. "Are you done with your speech? I've got places to be." That was the moment Frank Caprio stopped being the warm, grandfatherly judge the public adored, and became something far more formidable. He rose slowly to his full height. The black robe seemed to transform him into a symbol of pure judicial authority. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, "you came here charged with aggressive driving. The fine was $150. A standard penalty, one I've reduced countless times for people who show humility and respect." He paused, letting the words settle, "But you chose to turn my courtroom into your personal stage for disrespect. So let me explain how this works." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, yet every word landed with precision: "Contempt of court. That's an additional $500. Sandra's smug expression wavered, disrupting court proceedings. He continued. "Another $300. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Failure to follow court orders regarding the cell phone added another charge. $200 more. The calculation was becoming painfully obvious to everyone in the room. But Judge Caprio was far from finished. Not even close. He turned toward the court clerk, his voice now carrying the full force of the bench. "Please note for the record that Ms. Mitchell has shown no remorse, no respect for these proceedings, and has demonstrated a clear pattern of contempt for the law that brought her here today." Then he faced Sandra again. She had gone pale. "Your original fine was $150. With the additional penalties for your behavior in my courtroom, your total fine is now $1,150. A wave of murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Sandra's face cycled through shock, anger, disbelief, and finally the slow realization of what she had just done. "You can't do that," she stammered. Judge Caprio smiled. The same gentle smile that had made him beloved by millions. But this time, it carried something more. Justice. "Ms. Mitchell, I can do that. I just did. And if you say one more disrespectful word in my courtroom, I will hold you in criminal contempt, which carries the possibility of jail time." The change was instant. Sandra's confidence collapsed like a house of cards. The woman who had strutted in as if she owned the room now stood frozen, mouth slightly open, finally grasping the seriousness of her situation. But what happened next would make this moment unforgettable. Subscribe to our channel right now, because what Judge Caprio does next will shock you. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss moments that show real justice in action. Sandra made one last desperate attempt to recover. "Look, Your Honor," she said softly. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't mean any disrespect. I was just having a bad day." Judge Caprio studied her in silence. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the lights overhead. "Ms. Mitchell, everyone has bad days. I have bad days. Every person in this courtroom has bad days. But we don't use bad days as an excuse to treat others with contempt." He paused, letting the message settle. "This isn't really about money. It's not about punishment for punishment's sake. This is about something much deeper." He gestured around the room. "This courtroom represents something sacred. It represents the rule of law. It represents the idea that disputes are resolved through reason and justice, not through power or arrogance." Sandra shifted uneasily, finally understanding the weight of her actions. "When you disrespect this court, you're not just disrespecting me. You're disrespecting everyone who has ever come here seeking justice. You're disrespecting the very foundation of an ordered society." The lesson was clear, but Judge Caprio wasn't done teaching. He looked directly at Sandra, his expression blending firmness with the compassion he was known for. "Now I'm going to give you a choice, Ms. Mitchell. A choice many people who've stood where you are would have welcomed." The courtroom leaned in. Cameras adjusted. Everyone sensed the moment mattered. "You can pay the fines, complete community service, and leave here having learned what I hope is a lesson in respect and humility." He paused. "Or you can continue to argue, in which case I will hold you in criminal contempt. You will spend the night in jail, and you will still owe the full amount." The decision was obvious. Sandra looked around the courtroom, perhaps seeing it clearly for the first time. A place of justice, not a stage for ego. "I'll pay the fine and do the community service, Your Honor," she said quietly. Judge Caprio nodded, but the most powerful moment was still ahead. "Ms. Mitchell, before you leave, I want you to understand something, he said, his voice returning to the calm tone that had earned him so much respect. I've been a judge for decades. I've seen people at their lowest and at their best. I've seen sincere remorse, and I've seen calculated manipulation. I've seen genuine hardship, and I've seen excuses carefully manufactured. He leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with her. What I saw from you today was someone who forgot that courtesy and respect are not signs of weakness. They are the foundation of a civilized society. His words lingered in the air, a lesson that reached far beyond the courtroom walls. You walked in here as if the world owed you something, as if your problems mattered more than anyone else's, as if your time was more valuable than the court's time. Sandra's head dropped. The shift from arrogance to shame was complete. But here's what I want you to remember, Ms. Mitchell. The respect you failed to show me today is the same respect you owe the cashier at a grocery store, the server taking your order, the mechanic fixing your car, every person you encounter in your daily life. The weight of his message wasn't just changing Sandra. It was changing everyone listening. Judge Caprio rose again, his authority now balanced with wisdom. Respect isn't about power, Ms. Mitchell. It's about recognizing the basic dignity of every human being. It's about understanding that civility is what keeps us from chaos. He gestured toward the door. You'll report to the clerk downstairs to arrange your community service. I'm assigning you to the downtown homeless shelter, not as punishment, but as education. Sandra looked up, confused. You'll spend 2 days working with people who have lost everything, who have nothing, and who still manage to treat others with courtesy and gratitude. Perhaps you'll learn something about grace under pressure. The meaning of the assignment was clear to everyone in the room, but Judge Caprio had one final lesson. Ms. Mitchell, you asked why you should respect me. Here is your answer. You don't respect me because I'm a judge. You respect me because I'm a human being. The same way you should respect every human being you meet. He paused to let it sink in. The robe, the title, the authority, those are all temporary. What truly matters is how we treat one another. Today you forgot that. I hope tomorrow you remember it. Sandra nodded slowly, tears forming in her eyes. Yes, Your Honor. I'm sorry. Judge Caprio's expression softened completely. Apology accepted, Ms. Mitchell. We all make mistakes. What matters is whether we learn from them. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as the weight of the moment settled in. As Sandra turned to leave, Judge Caprio called out one last time. Mitchell. She turned back. Good luck with your community service. I have a feeling you're going to surprise yourself with what you learn. For the first time since entering the courtroom, Sandra smiled. A real smile. Not arrogant, not calculated, but genuinely grateful. Thank you, Your Honor. Then something unexpected happened. As she reached the door, Sandra stopped, turned around, and faced the courtroom. I want to apologize to everyone here, she said, her voice steady and humble. To the court staff, to the people waiting for their cases, to everyone who had to witness my behavior today. Judge Caprio watched quietly, a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. I came in here thinking I was better than this place, better than these proceedings. I was wrong. Completely wrong. Judge Caprio didn't just teach me about respect today. He showed me what real leadership looks like. The room fell absolutely silent. Real leadership isn't about having power over people. It's about lifting people up, even when they don't deserve it, even when they've treated you poorly. She looked directly at Judge Caprio. Thank you for not giving up on me, Your Honor. I promise I'll do better. The applause began slowly. One officer, then a clerk, then the entire gallery. Even the camera crew joined in. Judge Caprio stood and applauded as well, not for himself, but for Sandra Mitchell's moment of genuine transformation. Like and share this video if you believe real justice is about transformation, not just punishment. Comment below with your thoughts on Judge Caprio's handling of the situation, and subscribe for more moments that show what true leadership looks like. As the applause faded, Judge Caprio addressed the courtroom one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, what we witnessed today is why I believe in our justice system. Not because of our power to punish, but because of our ability to educate, to elevate, to transform. He looked around the room. Ms. Mitchell came in here as one person and is leaving as another. That's not because of anything I did. It's because she chose to listen. She chose to learn. She chose to grow. I've come to understand that most people aren't truly bad. They're just people caught in bad moments, people who temporarily lose sight of what they stand for. He took off his glasses, wiping them slowly as he spoke. Our role isn't to tear people down at their worst. Our role is to remind them of who they can be at their best. The wisdom of those words reached far beyond the courtroom. As the session continued with the remaining cases, the atmosphere had clearly shifted. Defendants spoke more carefully. Attorneys showed more courtesy. Even the gallery seemed more focused. The Sandra Mitchell case had turned into an unplanned lesson in leadership, respect, and human dignity. Later that day, as Judge Caprio reviewed his docket, he reflected on what had happened. In 4 decades on the bench, he had presided over thousands of cases. Yet the Sandra Mitchell case stood out as a perfect example of why he had chosen public service. Not to exercise power, but to use authority wisely. Not to shame people, but to teach them. Not to break them down, but to help build them up. The video from that courtroom would soon go viral, viewed by millions around the world. But its true value went far deeper. It reminded people that real leadership isn't about control or dominance. It's about inspiring others to become better versions of themselves. Sandra Mitchell entered Judge Caprio's courtroom as an arrogant, dismissive woman who believed the world should bend to her convenience. She left understanding that respect, dignity, and civility are the pillars of a civilized society. And Judge Frank Caprio went home that night knowing he had done his job exactly as it was meant to be done, with wisdom, compassion, and a moral authority that can't be taught in a classroom, only earned through decades of treating every person as worthy of dignity, even when they fail to offer it in return. That is the true measure of leadership. Not how you treat people when they are easy, but how you treat them when they are at their worst. Judge Frank Caprio showed the world what real justice looks like, and Sandra Mitchell learned a lesson she would never forget. But the story didn't end there. 3 months later, Sandra Mitchell returned to Judge Caprio's courtroom, not as a defendant, but as a volunteer coordinator from the homeless shelter where she had completed her community service. She approached the bench with confidence once again, but this time it was earned, not entitled. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm and respectful. "I wanted to thank you personally for what you did for me that day." Judge Caprio smiled, recognizing the woman who had changed so profoundly. "I didn't just complete my community service," Sandra continued. "I stayed. I've been volunteering there for 3 months now. I've learned more about humanity, dignity, and what truly matters in life than I did in the previous 45 years combined." She paused, emotion clear in her voice. "You could have destroyed me that day. You had every right to make an example of me. Instead, you chose to teach me. You saw potential in me that I didn't even see in myself." The courtroom, filled with defendants and spectators, listened closely to this unexpected epilogue. "I'm here today because I want everyone in this courtroom to understand something," Sandra said, turning toward the gallery. "Judge Caprio doesn't just deliver justice. He changes lives. He changed mine." Judge Caprio nodded slowly, clearly moved. "Mitchell," he said, "you changed your own life. I simply gave you the opportunity, the choice to grow, to learn, to become better. The rest was all you." This moment truly went viral. The video of Sandra's return, her testimony of transformation, and Judge Caprio's humble response spread across social media, becoming a powerful reminder that justice at its best restores rather than simply punishes. Sandra Mitchell had once been a cautionary tale of arrogance and disrespect. She became a living example of second chances, moral leadership, and real human transformation. And Judge Frank Caprio continued doing what he had always done, treating every person who entered his courtroom as capable of growth, deserving of dignity, and worthy of another chance, because that is what true justice looks like. Not the cold enforcement of rules alone, but the thoughtful application of wisdom, compassion, and hope for human redemption.